Hi, good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's Healthy Perspective Show. Thanks for everybody who joined me today. Um, I chose this morning to talk a little bit about some lessons that I've learned from traditional Chinese medicine, and I picked this topic partly because we just finished our uh, revised second edition, which is updated and expanded, of Healing with Chinese Herbs, and I'm going to be teaching a class on the principles of TCM next month, as well as we have some other materials that we have on traditional Chinese medicine. And I became acquainted with traditional Chinese medicine back in the 80s when Nature Sunshine uh, uh, came out with their line of Chinese herbal formulas that were created by Subhuti Dharmananda. And as part of the launch of that, I had the opportunity to go to mainland China for 3 weeks with Subhuti Dharmananda, his wife, who's a naturopath, and two of the people from the Nature Sunshine Research and Development team, the botanist and the head of the Research and Development Department. And so I kind of came to really enjoy Chinese culture, and what I learned of the basics of Chinese medicine from Subhuti really opened my eyes, because um, I'd started to understand herbalism from an energetic viewpoint, and but there was a lot of stuff that I had been kind of indoctrinated with in the culture that grew up around the start of Nature Sunshine. I mean, a lot of people in Utah use herbs. There's a strong pioneer tradition of it. Yeah, but a lot of what herbalism was, and the people who introduced it to me, it was a lot about cleansing, detoxification, not a lot about the idea of tonics or things that would strengthen parts of the body. It was more kind of a straightforward medicinal approach to herbs, a lot oriented towards, here are the herbs that are historically used to treat these different diseases. So, you look up disease, and here's a list of herbs that have been used to treat that disease, with not a lot of explanation or understanding why. And so TCM became very fascinating to me, and I've read different books on it and so forth. I'm by far no means an expert on it, but the principles of TCM have meant a lot to me, because what most people kind of get hung up on in the whole herb nutritional supplement world is this idea of like miracle cures. Like, okay, like Chinese herbs are amazing, blah, blah. Well, when I went to China, I remember seeing one of the botanical gardens where they had the displays. They were using translations of some of the Chinese herbs, and they translated them into the same kind of standard things you read in Western herbalism, like there are diuretics and diaphoretics and laxatives and so forth. So I realized that Chinese herbs have the same properties, the same actions as Western herbs, but it's the philosophy in which they're applied that is really different. And also that led me into looking into Ayurveda, a little bit of Native American medicine. I'd already become somewhat familiar with a little bit of the traditional Western medicine, and all of this was based on a very different philosophy than modern Western medicine. So what I want to do is kind of contrast the philosophy, first of all, of traditional systems of medicine with the issues we're talking about. And the weaknesses of modern medicine are that it is, number one, reductionistic, not holistic. Second, it's mechanistic, not vitalistic. And third, it's treatment oriented, not prevention oriented. So what I mean by reductionistic is it's a problem that plagues modern science, which is somehow that you are able to, if you break something down into all of its tiny little components, you're able to understand it and explain it all in terms of looking at all of the parts that make up the whole. And this gets carried to the point that modern medicine gets so specialized that there's someone who specializes in the urinary system, another one who specializes in the feet, someone who specializes in internal medicine or working with the bones or working with the cardiology and so forth. And when my father was in the hospital after he had a stroke and right before he passed away, he had one doctor who was looking after his lungs, which were having problems because of the stroke. His cardiologist, who was familiar with his history with his heart, a little bit of high blood pressure. My dad didn't have real high blood pressure, but he had a little tendency to high blood pressure. And the other doctor was dealing with the neurologist who was dealing with the stroke. And all three of them were telling my mom different stories about how my dad was doing based on the little piece of my dad's body that they were looking at, not on the overall picture of what my father was going through. And that was a very interesting thing to me. It's why some years ago I remember David Winston saying he was with a group of medical doctors, and one of them said I was treating this uterus once, and David said he interrupted them and said, "You were treating a uterus, like a disembodied uterus?" He says, "I don't think so. I think you were treating a woman." And that's kind of the level of the whole idea of this reductionistic thing. The parts of the body can only be understood in relationship to the whole. And that goes one step further, as we'll talk about later, that the whole includes the non-material part of us, something that modern medicine tends to deny, which goes into the second step, which is that modern medicine is very mechanistic, not vitalistic. By mechanistic, we mean it's material in its observation, which is the way a lot of science goes. It denies that there's a creator. It denies that there's intelligence. It denies that there's anything that's spiritual. Everything is purely mechanical and physical. So the body is viewed very much like a machine that has parts that wear out or get damaged or whatever, and therefore we can correct that by like fixing it like a car mechanic would fix a car, by replacing parts or going in and lubricating. Of course, the other part of it is the body is biochemical in nature, so we can go in and we can tweak different things in the biochemistry to fix the things that are going wrong, which is drugs and surgery. But traditional systems of medicine are vitalistic. All traditional systems of medicine, as we'll explain in a moment, rely on the idea that there is an invisible part up to life. They call it different names, and maybe even have multiple terms to refer to the invisible part of things. But that invisible part is included in the idea of what constitutes medicine. In other words, it's not just the person's what do you call it? This is being recorded for the person who's having internet problems. It's not just about the material. It's also about the spirit, the soul, the vital force is what the traditional Western medicine called it. The vital force. The idea of chi or ki in Oriental medicine and prana in Ayurvedic medicines, we'll talk about it in a minute, all suggest that there's an invisible component to illness which is tied into our mental, emotional, and spiritual state. And of course, the biggest weakness and the thing that I've been the most critical of in terms of medicine is that it's treatment-oriented, not prevention-oriented. I've indicated that I think that we should call our healthcare system a disease care system, because that's what it is. It's something that people don't really use until they get sick, and then they go to a doctor to take care of their disease. Whereas if I was looking at a healthcare system, it would be educating people how to eat healthier, helping them exercise, helping them have a good mental and emotional attitude towards life. All these things that would deal with keeping people healthy in the first place. Now, what's interesting about TCM is that in traditional Chinese medicine, of course, this is what I've heard, and I haven't heard anything that contradicts it. So that anciently the doctor got paid as long as, this is probably true mostly for the wealthy, the imperial families and so forth, he got paid as long as they were healthy. For every day that someone in the household was sick, the doctor got docked in pay. And so the incentive was to be able to identify the subtle changes that led to that a person was getting sick, and to be able to correct that so they wouldn't get sick, so to keep them healthy, and also to get them well as fast as possible. Now that would be an interesting thing for a universal healthcare model. And not that I'm in favor of government-sponsored healthcare, but if we were to do government-sponsored healthcare, the ideal thing would be for doctors to get paid for a certain number of clients or patients that they're responsible for helping to stay healthy, and they lose money for every one of those that is sick. It certainly changed things. And also, I've often thought of this from the standpoint, my father and my uncles were painting contractors, and I've worked a little bit in construction and so forth. And when you work in that kind of work, you don't get paid till the job is done. In other words, if I go in and painted somebody's house and I did a lousy job, they're going to make me go in and fix it, okay, before I get paid. So it would be kind of interesting if medicine was held to the same standard, that they only got paid if people got well. That would definitely change the whole paradigm. But moving on here, traditional systems medicine, and we're talking TCM in particular, is holistic. And I'll explain how and why in a minute. It's vitalistic, and it is prevention oriented. And I think that's what we really need, is to get a change in the way we think about quote unquote healthcare / disease care. And so in the little booklet that I have here, and so all of this is, maybe not all of it, because I'll probably say some things that I didn't write in the book, but I took 6 lessons I learned from TCM that I think are really vital. And really important to understand if you really want to have a holistic, vitalistic, prevention-oriented system of healing. And so the first one of these is that life and health are based on energy. Now, what I mean by this is this is a very simple observable fact, okay? That the difference between a live body and a dead body is that the dead body has ceased being animated. All of the structures are still present, and shortly after the person dies, probably most of the cells in their body are still alive. They gradually all die from the lack of circulation and oxidation within a short period of time, but they don't all die immediately. But there is a moment where something is gone that was there before, that was making the lungs breathe and the heart beat and causing all this movement to take place. And movement is a function of energy. And therefore, it makes sense to me that health and life are a function of energy. And the idea that there's an electrical potential in the body, and that electrical potential is maintained at a pH of 7.4 makes a lot of sense to me. This is from the mechanical point of view, just a strictly mechanical point of view, that there is a level of energy that has to be maintained in the body that basically runs the processes of the body. And as the system becomes more acidic, there are less electrons or less electrical energy there, and the body's vitality starts to diminish. Now, that's from a purely mechanistic point of view, which is why I also believe that energy healing is part of the wave of the future. I've gone to chiropractor for a long time that's used lasers. I have a little microcurrent electrical device that I've used to help heal injuries and so forth. And there's a lot to be said. I've experimented with and seen a lot of different kinds of devices that are designed to reestablish energy flow in the body as a method of healing. And that is, of course, the entire premise of the Chinese system called acupuncture, that there is energy flowing through certain channels in the body that regulate organs and maintain function, and that you get blockages or lack of flow, and that by inserting needles at certain points, it reestablishes the flow of energy and causes healing. But Chinese massage is aimed at energy, and Chinese herbalism is aimed at energy. So in other words, one of the ways that herbs are defined in China is by what channels they enter. In other words, by what meridians they restore flow in, the flow of energy. So there's a viewpoint here that's not just mechanistic like we think in the West. Oh, this plant contains this chemical constituent that does this. There's the idea that the plant as a whole somehow, or the substance as a whole, affects the energy flow of the body and somehow balances, restores it, and so forth. And that is a concept present in all traditional systems of medicine. Now, so Chinese medicine has concepts like qi, or sometimes I learned it originally as qi, which is this basic life energy out of which everything is made. And then they also have the idea of shen, which is like the spirit or emotional energy in your heart, and jing, which is your basic vital energy. We have in the West, the concept that we have a spirit or a soul, and in Native American medicine, they talked about the spirit, that that plants have a spirit, and we have a spirit, and the spirit of the plant talks to our spirit and helps us with the healing. It's not just mechanistic. In fact, in traditional Native medicine, the healer would go and sit with the plants, and try to slow themselves down enough that they could sense the vibration of the plant and get information from the plants, which is how they claim herbal knowledge came about. But there's also an interesting tradition that I've read about native healers who used a very few number of herbs, but what they would do is they would look at the patient, assess the patient, what was going on with the patient, and then they would go sit with the plant, and they would think of the patient, and then they would visualize that and basically ask the plant for help, and then they would wait until the plant agreed, and then they would harvest the plant. And it's kind of interesting because plants, adapt themselves to different environmental conditions. I've often wondered if they weren't actually encouraging the plant to produce chemical compounds that would help the person who was sick. I mean, this is like poo-pooed in Western society a lot. That there's a metaphysical, which just means beyond the physical. That's a awfully misused word. Okay. Or a supernatural, beyond the natural. That's another misused word, because a lot of people think metaphysical and supernatural just applies to, witchcraft and stuff that they're afraid of. But I mean, all spirituality is metaphysical. Someone says they can't see anybody or anything. Are the rest of you getting this? Is it okay? Because I got a couple of people who are having some problems with hearing this. Anyway, so if any of you are hearing it, would you mind typing me a message? Make sure that I'm actually getting through. Okay, so someone says they do see me. So I guess it might be a local internet connection problem. But anyway, back to this idea. Okay, and that is a very, very important thing to consider. And it's one of the reasons why I'm doing an upcoming free class, which is going to be in December, where I'm actually going to talk about what I consider the dual way that you should approach clients. You should approach them energetically from the what's going on with them mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and physically with what's going on with them physically, and do that both at the same time, because there is, I believe, a healing force. I mean, and it's just the most fundamental. We can argue about terminology, and we can argue about what it means or what the nature of it is, but when you cut yourself, what heals the cut? There is an intelligence, a guiding force, which was labeled the chi or the prana or the vital force or whatever, that guides the body back towards repairing that injury. There's something going on. And when you die, it's gone. Okay? Now, the second really critical principle that really I woke up to in studying TCM was the idea that balance is the key to health. Because prior to that time, there was this idea of you have, like a lot of the people I grew up with, like cleansing was for everybody. In fact, when I was consulting with Nature Sunshine, they could have been called the cleansing company, because it started off with people just giving people cleanses. And I got better doing what we call cleansing or colon cleansing or whatever. It was really helpful. I'm about to do it again because my digestive tract's got kind of out of kilter and I want to get it back in line. But the idea that TCM got was that if the body can go out of balance in one direction, it can go out of balance in the other direction. And so what often happens is, because we live in a society where people eat too much and they are exposed to a lot of chemicals and stuff, detoxification is a very valuable general therapy. But if a person is malnourished and they're thin and emaciated, they don't need a detoxification therapy, they need a building therapy. And that idea that there was detoxification therapy and building therapy had been a little bit introduced to me with Edward Millett, but really in TCM, it took roots with me. And one of my early experiences with this is my midwife friend asked me to go over and see a friend of hers who had called up and said she wasn't feeling well. When my midwife friend came over to see her, she collapsed into a coma like right after she arrived there, and she had to take her to the hospital. She was very low in mineral electrolytes and so forth, and she had just gotten out of the hospital, and she had been doing a lot of detoxification. She'd been doing a lot of fruit and vegetable diets, taking herbs to clean herself out. And the first week or two she did this, she felt better, but then she started to feel worse, and the person who was talking to her said, "Oh, it's just a healing crisis. Just stick with it. You'll feel better as soon as you." But the more she cleansed, the worse she felt. And I remember I walked in on this lady, and she was so skinny. I mean, literally like one of those people who's skin and bones, pale as could be, obviously very weak. And the first thought that came to my mind is, lady, you got nothing left to clean out. You need to eat. You need to put something into your body. And I actually found out she didn't have very good digestion, so she wasn't digesting her food because she was basically low in hydrochloric acid and enzymes. And so I put her on some stuff to help her digest food, told her to start eating some chicken soup, putting a little protein back in her diet, whatever, and she got better. And that really woke me up to this concept that, you could have an imbalance that goes one direction or another. And what's really interesting is you can get an identical symptom in the body from the body being out of balance one way or the opposite way. And so if it's out of balance the opposite way, and you apply the therapy that's for out of balance over here, the person will get worse. And then people in the herb community often have blamed that on a healing crisis, which it's not. That's not what a healing crisis is. A healing crisis is when you're eating healthy and taking good care of your body, and your body suddenly decides to clean itself out, and you get a little bit of symptoms of acute illness, like a little diarrhea or nauseous or something that lasts for a day or two, and then it passes as the body gets rid of what was stored in it that was irritating it. But anyway, that really came to fruition when I solved what I thought was the mystery of ADHD, where you have a child who is hyperactive, nervous, and whatever, and you give them nervines that are supposed to relax people, and they get more hyper, and you give them a stimulant, and they calm down. And that's really weird, and I finally figured out about the balance between the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, and that you can be nervous and agitated by either having the sympathetic being dominant or the parasympathetic being dominant. And the therapy depends on which way it's out of balance. And so that's been one of the most valuable lessons I've ever learned, because the goal is to maintain homeostasis. Homeostasis is the maintenance of the normal conditions within the body. And so everything that happens to us, maybe it's cold outside or it's hot outside, or we haven't eaten in, 10 hours or whatever's happening, the body has to try to compensate for what's going on in our life in order to maintain the internal environment that makes it possible for all our cells to live. And so what I've come to believe, and I'm going to write about this in the book I'm working on talking about CBD and cannabis and the endocannabinoid system and so forth. I want to talk about this from a broader perspective, which is that cells living in this giant community we call the body, in order to keep things balanced, have to send messages to each other about how the body's out of balance, so that it can trigger the right reaction from other cells to act to bring the body back into balance, into homeostasis. And it's apparent to me that herbs, having phytochemicals that are very similar to the chemicals that our body produces to make those communications, basically can be used to nudge homeostasis. That is, when the body's out of balance in a particular direction, by using an herb, it sends a message to the body that says, oh, we're out of balance like this, and nudges the system to start to restore homeostasis or balance. One of the things that people will do who don't understand this is they'll find a remedy that makes them feel good. They'll take it, they're starting to feel better, then they get to feeling better, and then they think of it like a drug. So, because you take a high blood pressure medication, it's not designed to cure high blood pressure. It's designed to manage high blood pressure, to help keep the high blood pressure down. It isn't actually restoring the body to homeostasis. But herbal remedies often do restore the body to homeostasis. And then if you continue taking that same herbal remedy after your body's already back in homeostasis, you gradually start pushing it out of balance in the opposite direction. And I've seen that happen. And again, that's something that I got from understanding this whole idea of balance from TCM. Now I'm going to hide my webcam for a second, because the third principle is closely related to that, which is the idea that if a therapy is going to be effective, it's because it's going to tip the balance of the body back towards the center, in the opposite direction of the imbalance. And so the goal of diagnosis or assessment, I mean, we should call it health assessment, because diagnosis is the term that the medical profession has copyrighted and says it's illegal for us to use. So I use the term health assessment. So assessing a person's health is assessing how they're out of balance. What way is their life, their body, everything out of balance, and how do we nudge them back into balance? And so the whole concept of yin and yang in TCM is really about this idea of balance. The body can be too hot, it can be too cold, it can be too dry or too damp. It can have an exterior, a superficial problem, or a deep interior problem. It can have acute problems or chronic problems. It can have an excess illness, a disease where there's too much of something, or it can have a disease of deficiency where there's too little of something. So you think of this in terms of diet. I typically have a person fill out a little sheet, of kind of what they're eating when I've done consults. And almost everybody that I talk to who's in the health field anyway says, well, I'm eating a healthy diet. But I'll look at their diet, and maybe their idea of a healthy diet is a low-fat diet. And they have a lot of symptoms that would go along with a deficiency of omega-3 essential fatty acids, or essential fatty acids, period, that are important for certain vital functions. And so I tell them, well, you need to balance out your diet, you need to add some fats. This is a lot of what TCM did. A lot of TCM worked with diet, with modulating diet to try to balance out a person's system. And this also gets into the idea that that's so prevalent in modern natural medicine, is the idea that there's this perfect diet for everybody. I talked about this in a previous thing. There is no perfect diet for everybody. And the reason why there's no perfect diet is because the demands being placed on the body, if you are an Inuit living in the north of Alaska with extremely cold, long winters, the stresses being placed on your body in that environment are completely different from the stresses being placed on your body if you're living in a tropical climate where it's hot all the time and very humid, which is different from what you have if you're in the desert or whatever. You have to find the diet that balances out the stresses your body is under. You have to find the herbs that balance out the stresses your body is under. And that's not always an easy thing to do. And so a system like TCM at least gives us clues of a place to begin to start to figure out how things are out of balance and what we can do to correct them. So the fourth principle, and this is the one that I think really, really solidified all this for me, is that the treatment should focus on the person, not on the disease. And in spite of me teaching this for years, and in spite of me getting up in classes and trying to carefully present this idea, I'll explain why you don't treat diseases. And someone at the end of the class in the question answer period will say, how do you treat this? And they'll give me the name of a disease. And the thing is that you cannot possibly know how to restore balance to a person based on a disease symptom unless you know what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what's going on, and what stresses they're under in their life, how they're eating, what supplements they're taking, and et cetera, so you can evaluate where they're out of balance. Because the goal is to bring the body back into balance. If I help nudge the body back towards homeostasis, the body has what? It has the capacity for self-regeneration. That's the whole idea of natural healing, is we're not trying to cure disease. We're trying to provide a nudging back to homeostasis to allow the vital force, the intelligence within the body, to affect repairs in the body. And if the body's not affecting repairs, there is some way in which the system is out of whack, and what is necessary for the body to affect those repairs is missing. And therefore, it's not about the disease the person has, it's about nudging them back. So there's a saying in TCM, different diseases, one treatment, one disease, different treatments. So when a person comes to you and they say, well, I have this problem, I want to know all the problems they have, all their quote unquote different diseases. So that would mean, maybe they have low thyroid and they're constipated and they're chilled all the time and they have low energy and they have dry skin and blah, 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 blah. And I get, all this thing of all the complaints that they have, and maybe they're having some leaky gut issues or whatever. Okay, so that you get this picture of all those complaints. Now, what TCM says is that one treatment that looks at that as a whole and says, all of that is interrelated. In other words, all those illnesses are happening in the same body, and health is maintained by the process of homeostasis. So in other words, where there's homeostasis, the body's internal environment is in balance, we're healthy. So all of those illnesses are arising from the same imbalanced biological terrain internally, which means they're all arising from the same basic root cause or causes. I mean, sometimes there's two or three, but those same root causes are giving rise to all the symptoms that we're experiencing in this thing. So if I find the correct treatment, that one treatment that restores homeostasis and helps bring the body back to balance will alleviate many diseases. Many things that don't appear to be related will nonetheless disappear once I nudge the body back to homeostasis. But the reverse of that is also true, that if there is one disease, like Subhuti would, in explaining this, said, okay, you get 3 clients in a row coming to a TCM physician, and each one of them has an ulcer. They will not get the same treatment. They will get different treatments. The treatment is individualized to the patient. It's not aimed at the disease, it's aimed at the patient. It's aimed at the client. That is such a revolutionary idea. And it is so hard to communicate to people and get them to think in this way. But that really, really set me to thinking. And I remember, as I started to look at the different TCM constitutional types and imbalances and started to familiarize with myself and start looking for these underlying, these patterns, like the situation that I just described to you with all those different health problems. One of the first things I would think of is there's a thyroid problem there. And the dry skin, the fatigue, even the leaky gut, all could be related to a lack of iodine or a poor functioning thyroid. And therefore, I would look towards restoring healthy thyroid function as probably the primary thing I would work on. And a lot of those other things would disappear. So it's not always easy to identify where the root cause of something is and what's going on in balance. But once you do, a lot of things clear up. So I was starting to learn this, and I went down to Arizona and was with a Nature Sunshine manager. I was trying to explain this to her. And she said, oh, good. She said, I have a really tough client coming in today, and I'll let you do the consult. So I thought, okay, wow. This was a top manager. I thought, I've really stuck my foot in my mouth, I just thought, well, the lady came in, and I do iridology, which is a way of looking at constitution. And she had the light brown eyes that are associated with what's called a biliary constitution, which is tendency to liver and digestive system problems. And she started talking, and all of the things she described were a typical pattern of poor digestion and poor liver function. And so within 5 minutes, I was like, it all just fit together as one little puzzle. I said, it's rather simple. She had a hiatal hernia. I pulled down her hiatal hernia. I gave her one Chinese herbal formula for the wood-stressed constitution. And all that stuff cleared up. And it's lovely when that happens. Sometimes it's not that easy. Sometimes it takes me 2 or 3 visits before I do that. And sometimes it's the reason why the person isn't getting well is because they've got some kind of crazy mental and emotional thing going on that's inhibiting healing. And I've got to go work with that to get that out of the way before they get well. But nonetheless, I really believe in that idea that if you find the right therapy for the person, then most of the health problems clear up. And so therefore, when someone just throws me out a name of a disease, I'm like, because I don't treat diseases. I work on people. So the bottom line is that all people with the same disease don't get well on the same treatment. And that is so obvious in modern medicine. You just look at the whole idea of the bell curve, okay? When they do research on a particular drug or therapy, it creates a bell curve, right? Distribution. There are a certain number of people who it just works perfectly for. Some people that it works okay for, and some people that get worse on it. That's always true. It's always true. There are people who have horrible side effects, people who do well on it, and other people who are in the middle, somewhere in between those two extremes. And so you're dealing with averages. But the question never gets asked in modern medicine, why did this person get worse on it, and why did that person get better, or why did this person get better on it, why did that person get worse on it? Why? What's the difference? Well, the difference is that you're dealing with a different person who has a different set of illnesses, and as we'll talk about in a minute, a different constitution. And that's not getting taken into account in the way we think in modern Western medicine. And we need to start understanding that, which leads to the idea of constitution, which is the fifth principle I learned from TCM. Actually, I didn't actually learn it from TCM. I learned it first from the traditional Western four-element model with the caloric, the melancholic, the phlegmatic, and the sanguine personalities. It was just that the Chinese constitutions further developed my idea of constitutional typing, as well as the fact that at the same time I was learning about Chinese constitutional types, I was also learning about constitutional iridology, that the iris was probably, I still think it is the best window into seeing a person's constitution, which is the constitution is basically probably a reflection of your genetic strengths and weaknesses. You've inherited a set of genes from your parents, and with that set of genes from your parents, you have certain strengths and you have certain liabilities. Every constitution has strengths, every constitution has liabilities. Because and here's why. Because to be given a strength in one area automatically makes you weaker in the opposite area. Okay? So if you're really, really good at paying attention and focusing like I am, hyper-focusing, it's really stressful and difficult when there are multiple things going on at once. I struggle with that. There are people who find it easy to deal with multiple things going on at once and like it and hate to sit and hyper-focus. My wife is one of them. She wants a job where everything's constantly changing, where she's interacting with different people, where there's lots of stuff going on. I couldn't handle that. I like to sit down at my computer and write a book, which I can sit for hours. That drives her crazy. The fact that you have a strength also means you have a weakness. The fact that you have a weakness also means you have a strength. The idea of constitution is really interesting, though, because constitution is what really suggests that there is a huge link between the mind, emotions, spiritual aspect of ourselves and the body, because all constitutional types include personality descriptions as well as tendencies to physical strengths and weaknesses, suggesting that there is a correlation between the mental, emotional, spiritual, and the physical that puts them together. And therefore, you were inherently born with certain personality tendencies that are corresponding with your genetics, but those personality tendencies also correspond with the genetics that also makes you prone to certain health problems. And that is the missing link of why on that little bell curve thing we talk about, some people do well on a particular therapy for a particular symptom, and other people don't. It's because we're not taking into account the idea of constitution. What's their genetics that we're dealing with? So all this leads to the fact that if you're going to stay healthy in the long run, you have to balance your constitution. You have to recognize, and this is true also in success in life. So this isn't just about physically healthy. This is about being mentally, emotionally, and spiritually healthy. You have to be able to acknowledge both your strengths and your weaknesses. So if we got into the iridology aspect of this, it's even more clear than it is in the TCM aspect of this. But you see particularly an iridology type, like someone who has what are called contraction furrows, used to be called nerve rings or stress rings or so forth. And people with those rings are hyperachievers. They're the kind of people who really go for things, and they tend to like juggle many tasks and be constantly, driving themselves to perfection and on, which actually can be really, really good traits, that can make for high achieving people and that sort of thing. But the liability of that is neuromuscular tension. They're prone to having chronic neuromuscular tension, and almost all their health problems, well, they may have other things going on in their constitution, but you'll often see a whole lot of health problems that are related to neuromuscular tension. So their strength also creates a weakness. And in order to stay healthy, in other words, to keep yourself in balance, you have to do things to balance out the weakness that corresponds with your strengths. And so they need to take time deliberately to relax. They need to take supplements that help them relax. Now, someone who's a laid back, easygoing, blah, 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 that's not going to be the constitutional therapy that they need. And again, this all leads into the idea that the same diet and lifestyle is not going to work for everybody, because you have not only the geographical, differences of the climate where you were affected by, but you also have the family and environmental influences of what's going on in people could be oftentimes in just really, really difficult, stressful circumstances, taking care of a sick family member, or just having gone through the loss of a job, or a divorce or whatever. And you don't think that can make people sick? And yet, if you're not, willing to really talk to someone and listen to them, you might just, dismiss, okay, they're under stress, let's give them some stuff for stress, blah, blah, blah. But just being able to help them a little bit with what's going on in their life often is enough to help them get well, because we're looking for how do we help nudge a person back to a more balanced state. And I, like I said, these principles have become so much a part of me and the way I think that I have a difficult time thinking about health and disease the way most people think about health and disease. It becomes very frustrating because I have to somehow try to translate where the person is at with, I want to fix this disease I'm experiencing, this symptom I'm experiencing, with, I want to help you nudge you back to lasting health. Okay? And so the thing about TCM and other traditional systems of medicine is they recognize this. They recognize the influence of climate on health. They recognize the influence of what's going on in your life and what's happening with you emotional and health. And they put this into the system. And so by studying these systems of traditional medicine, it actually helps you learn to think holistically, to think vitalistically, and to think in terms of how do I nudge this person into a state where it's going to keep them healthy, not just make them temporarily feel better, but how am I going to nudge them back into a state where they're going to stay healthy? That's the prevention oriented. I want people to stay healthy. I don't want them just to come back to me. Of course, that's the problem with me as a clinician, and is that I'm too good at getting people well in what I've done in clinical work. And so basically what happens is I don't have clients for very long, because pretty soon they're really happy with what's happened in talking with me, and they don't come back maybe for a while, until maybe a couple of years later they're out of whack again. But that's what we're supposed to be doing, I would think. That's what healthcare should all be about. And we are currently in a system that favors treatment over prevention, that looks at everything mechanically and reductionistically. And I think that the traditional systems of TCM are really needed in our culture to be able to get this. So I'll come to the questions in a minute. I just want to tell you, okay, if you want to learn more, the little book here is only $6.95. Okay, so you can go to our website and buy it. It lays out what I just did, and then lays out the constitutional types and things about the meridian system and everything. So it's a very easy read, but very profound. Okay, and if you want to learn more about it, I did 2 webinars for my members on this, talking about the meridian channels and then, of course, the meridian cycles. So what I'm going to do is to teach a 3-part class on the meridian channels, the meridian cycles, and the constitutions in TCM. That'll be November 7th, 14th, and 21st at 5:30 p.m. Mountain Time. You'll get the handouts and the PowerPoints so that you will be able to share the information with other people. That class is $60, and for people who are part of our member program, who are paying the $19.95 a month to be part of a member program, since they already had like 2/3 of the class, I'm only charging them $15. We're also doing a bundle for people who are interested in, especially in Nature Sunshine, who want to like promote the Nature Sunshine remedies, which go along with what's in this book. It doesn't mention the Nature Sunshine remedies by name, but we have a cheat sheet that you can use to see what Nature Sunshine products match this. You get the Chinese herb book, the class, and 25 copies of the 2 issues of Sunshine Sharing we produced on this to use for handouts, and 25 of our Chinese constitutional questionnaires, which people can fill out to see, how their body is out of balance, and 25 of the cheat sheets. So you can turn around and use this as a class to promote your Nature Sunshine business. Also, just want to mention that if you're watching this on YouTube afterwards, please subscribe to our channel, hit the like button. And if any of you, pick up this on YouTube or social media, please share it. I'm really anxious to want to get this kind of information out to as many people as possible. I feel like I have something very, very vitally important to say, because I think I've been able to distill very difficult concepts into into an easier way of understanding them that really helps people get started. And I want to get that out to more people. If you'd like to attend the What Live webinars, this is the link if you're watching this on YouTube. And also just remember that we need your financial support to continue. Join our free mailing list. You'll be notified when we have products. We've got some other stuff coming out very soon. You can also join our member program. In fact, you could join our member program for $19.95 and then get the class for $15 if you want. But you also, as a member, get discounts on all of our other products. And you can check out our web store for all of that. So I'm going to take care of a few of the questions and comments that people have put in. Someone asked about the Zyto balance. I think the Zyto is an example of what we're going to have in emerging technologies that read the body from an energetic point of view, and therefore help to recommend remedies based on energetics rather than on constituents. So I've used the Zyto Compass. I also do muscle response testing, which is really doing the same thing. The recording does get emailed as well as posted on YouTube. So in other words, if you're signed up for these webinars, you get an email that says, here's the replay. You can go watch the replay. Someone asked, I helped take care of my 91-year-old mama for the last 10 months. Needless to say, I did not eat right. Now my gut is all out of balance. I am not having regular bowel movements. I'm taking psyllium hulls, cat's claw, olive leaf, black walnut, and IF relief. Am I on the right track? Well, you're on the right track if it's starting to work. That's the key. I can't say, because I need more information about like what you're eating and exactly what's going on. But a lot of that sounds really good, and as long as your bowels are starting to move better. But a lot of mucus in the stool is actually not bad. It just means your lymphatics are clearing out. The dairy tends towards like if you eat a lot of cheese, it actually makes the stool more fudgy. I don't know how else to explain it. So it doesn't move as clearly. The fiber helps soften the stool, make it easier to pass, and so forth. I really like the cellular detox formula with the psyllium hulls. If you tend towards dry stool, I usually mix psyllium with the freshly ground flax seeds because it really helps lubricate the colon. But again, because yes, I do phone consults, and as I if you go to stephenhorn.com, there is on that front page I think a link to my scheduling calendar. I have certain times of the week set aside where people can do online scheduling to schedule a consult with me. If none of those times work, you can call my office. Our toll-free number is 800-416-2887, or email me at the webinars at treelight.com, which is, I think, the email that goes out with these webinars. And we can try to arrange a different time. But you can schedule the consults yourself on my website. There's also a link on my Facebook page. Not my personal Facebook page, but my professional Facebook page, and my the Herb Guy. I'm not the Herb Guy Wellness Center Facebook page also, that you can schedule consults. And if you email me, I can send you the link so you can do that. I offer a number of different kinds of consults, including consults for flower essences and emotional healing. So anyway, I hope that you got some valuable information out of this presentation today, because I'm telling you that this understanding that I got from TCM, and also from studying traditional Western medicine and some of these other systems, this whole different view of how you go about helping someone get well, which is a big paradigm shift. But the reason why I think this is so important is, before I did that, I suffered from the same problem that modern medicine suffers from. You go and you pick the remedy for the particular disease, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Okay? Sometimes it's not the right thing at all. And so I felt like the results I was getting were often hit and miss. And I couldn't figure out why. Once I understood constitutions and the idea of balance and stuff like that, and learned, I learned iridology, I learned muscle response testing, and then later I learned a little tongue and pulse. I got better at pinpointing how the body is out of balance, looking at a person's diet, lifestyle, and mental and emotional state, and seeing how they were out of balance, and then finding the remedy that was going to pull them back to balance. And I started getting much more dependable results, and much more rapid results too, especially with people who are chronically ill. And so that's why I encourage you, if you're interested in this, to learn this stuff, because the disease treatment approach is a disease care approach. It's not a health care approach. And that's great. Is Orlando going, what is some kind of summit Nature Sunshine's having? Because I don't think so. Nobody's invited me to speak or anything, and so I'm not going to go. I can't afford to go all these events right now if nobody's paying me to go. So I wasn't at the Nature Sunshine convention in Las Vegas because I don't have the money to afford to go, and they didn't ask me to speak. So I'm not planning at this time going to the summit, because I'm still trying to rebuild my business after the loss of some of my educational materials, like the Comprehensive Guide to Nature Sunshine and so forth. And the Chinese herb book is the first of the projects we've done. We've got 2 more coming out. We've got the Herbal Energetics chart, the Herbal Energetics book, which I'm also going to do a class on that in January. And then we also have, I'm working on the CBD book, and I also have a book, new Nature's Choices book, which is kind of a little guide to Nature Sunshine that is like compliant, doesn't make disease claims, but at least is a little guide you can pass out to acquaint people with Nature Sunshine. So all those products are coming out in the next few months. So everybody, hope that you'll continue to support us and help us get our business back on track financially as we recover from that changes that the FDA had. You might have seen some of my posts on Facebook about criticizing the FDA. I'm not really happy with the FDA. So anyway, thanks everybody for being part of our program. Thanks for your questions and comments, and we'll catch you on the next episode in a couple of weeks. I also want to mention next week will be the last of my Seeking Light and Truth webinars on relationships, male-female relationships. I will be moving on to the topic of money, business and economics after I finish the relationship one, and that's going to be an interesting topic to be discussing. So if you're interested in stuff that's not health related, sign up for the other show. Anyway, have a good day, and look forward to talking to you again in a couple of weeks. Goodbye.